Good afternoon, it's Lee Cassidy from Tactile Technology, and it's our SMESec day again. So today we're actually talking about Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. And what we've got is Pete to join us and tell us a bit more about it. So let's get Pete on. How are you doing, Pete?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good to meet you.
Yeah, so let's tell us a little bit more about what Cyber Essentials is. But I know it's also, being condoned by the UK government as being a basic way of ensuring that your business got some level of capability around cybersecurity. And it's also been pushed by the National Cybersecurity Centre, I believe, as well.
Yeah, it's not actually just pushed by the Cybersecurity Centre, it's actually their scheme.
So they actually developed the scheme as well?
Yeah,
okay.
So it's a government-sponsored scheme that was, exactly as you said, it was established to help improve the baseline cybersecurity of UK business.
Okay, so tell us a bit about the process then and what Cyber Essentials gives you as a business.
So what we see on a day-to-day basis is our customers are being asked to prove their cybersecurity standard by presenting the certification, usually by their clients as part of tender processes, or they might have already won a contract, but then part of that requirement to actually achieve that, to deliver that contract, is to have Cyber Essentials in place. And the supply chain are doing this really not just to protect their data, but they also want to ensure that their supplier is not going to go bust or go under due to a cyber attack, ransomware attack, or anything else like that.
Okay, so it's at least giving a certain level of awareness and understanding and some procedures and process in place to protect not only the business that we're talking about, but also the actual partner business as well. So whether that's a government body doing a contract or it's a third party that's got some kind of work that required from someone, at least you're actually showing that you've got a specific level, and the certification show that you've actually proved it to someone.
Absolutely, and we like to say really Cyber Essentials is doing the basics well. There's no black art to it. It doesn't require companies to go out and buy expensive cybersecurity software. Really, it's about setting up their systems, configuring them, and running them in a secure manner. And if you look at each of the individual controls, they're all sort of good common sense controls, and when they come together, provide a really nice layer of security overall.
Okay, so talk about the process then, that if somebody wanted to go down and actually be certified for Cyber Essentials, what they might have to do and how the process follows.
Yeah, so the first thing they need to do is find an appropriate certification body to go through the process with, and that can be quite tricky. There's a number of hundred, I think it's about 300 different certification bodies across the country, and they all do deliver this service in a slightly different way. Generally, the standard is the same, but it's down to sort of personal approach, and you've got to sort of find a certification body that's aligned with your values and standards, and it's going to deliver the certification in what we like to say is a pain-free manner. And there's nothing worse than companies jumping through hoops that they didn't need to jump through. So it's very important that the certification body's got experience to be able to align the standard with the individual business.
Okay, and so how does it kick off then? What do they have to do first?
So the basic level of Cyber Essentials, because it is a two-stage process, most companies will just do the basic level, but a number of companies will be required to go to what we call the Cyber Essentials Plus level. But we'll start off, I'll describe the basic level first, and it's essentially a self-assessment. So there's circa 70 odd questions that the client will have to work through, and those questions will cover things like the scope. So what's actually included in the assessment? Is it the whole company or is it part of the company? And then defining that is really important. And it's very, at this stage, if you get the scope wrong, it can lead to all sorts of issues further down the line. If you include items in the scope that shouldn't be in the scope, i.e. you don't have control over, or are basically managed by somebody else that that should be in their scope, then you can really struggle to apply the standard if you have no control over the system. So you work through the question set, and essentially you provide your compliance with each of the standard in each of the control areas.
Okay. Can you give us an example of one of the questions might be? Yeah.
So at the first stage, you're looking at in the scope, you'll be detailing how many devices, how many computer devices you have in the company as an example, and you'll be required to actually detail what operating system they're running on, what sort of device they are, what's the make and model, what version of operating system is it running. And the reason why that data is being captured is so we can ensure that the systems that are in use are actually still supported.
Okay.
A requirement of the standard. Another question may be, do you use anti-malware software, which is another requirement of the standard. And in many cases, Windows 10, Windows Defender is perfectly adequate and compliant. But if you've got a company that's using Mac devices, for example, they would have had to gone out and procured an anti-malware software, because there is no native anti-malware that's compliant on a Mac.
So it's just making sure there's some level of malware and antivirus software installed and current as well.
And then for each area, they do sort of go down into further details. So there would be further questions along the lines of, is the anti-malware signature base updated at least daily? That's a requirement of the standard. And an interesting area around anti-malware at the moment is, there's some fairly advanced next generation anti-malware systems coming out now. We're seeing a lot of them in use, which work on behavioral based systems, which does not really fit with the standard. The standard still requires a signature based system to be in place as a backup, and that's something that we're starting to see quite a lot at the moment.
Okay, so the company fills out this questionnaire, all the different areas, making sure it's within the scope that they're talking about. So computer systems and network, that's actually a part of their business that they can control. They've completed it through, answered all the questions. What happens next?
So once they've gone through that, they will then submit those answers, which will be submitted to the certification body that they're doing the assessment through. The certification body then mark those answers in accordance with the defined marking scheme. The standard is prescriptive. It's not open to interpretation. So it is quite clear, and they'll either be fully compliant, and then the certification body will be able to award certification, or there may be some areas that require either further detail or are non-compliant. And then in that scenario, it would get passed back to the client, and they would have to either elaborate, add further detail, or make changes appropriately to their systems, and then reflect those changes in their answer to it.
Are there any common areas that you see on a regular basis where people need to provide more information or aren't compliant?
Yeah, a really common one is one I may use as an example earlier on about listing the devices in the scope section, not putting the relevant or appropriate detail around operating system versions. It's not that common knowledge amongst business owners and IT users that, for example, Windows 10 typically has 3 different versions that are in use at any one time, and there are many versions of Windows 10 that have now gone out of support, just as an example. So that's one area that we do see quite regularly. So, when you're filling this in, make sure you put in enough detail around that in the scope domain.
Yeah, could there be issues like people using like a free version of an antivirus tool and things that doesn't get updates and things, or those kind of issues?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, some free anti-malware solutions are compliant. For example, ClamAV gets used fairly regularly when Mac devices are in play. The important thing is that it's updated, the signature updated at least daily.
Okay, so they get to the end of this and they end up getting a certification. They delivered a certification number. How long does that last for?
It's an annual certification. It's very similar to the vehicle MOT process, where it's a point-in-time assessment, and it's the business operator's responsibility to maintain that standard throughout the year until it's then assessed again at 12 months later.
Okay.
So yeah, that's how the system works.
All right. So at the end of that, you've got something that you can show your partners, or if you're bidding on some work with a government body or local authority, you can show that you've got a baseline level of security, and that they can feel more comfortable that you've got at least the basics covered then. So if a company wants to go to Cyber Essentials Plus, what's different then?
So, like I said before, it's a two-stage process to get to Plus. You first complete that self-assessment stage. You achieve your Cyber Essentials certification, and then you have a 3-month window to conduct what we call the Plus technical audit. And this is where a certification body that's qualified to deliver Plus certifications will engage with you. And this is really down to this does affect your certification body selection. If you're going for Plus, then make sure that you identify a certification body that can deliver Plus and is not going to have to change certification bodies halfway through the process. You could do that if you wanted to, but it would make your life a little bit more difficult, and it would be a lot more straightforward if you go straight through from basic to Plus with one same certification body.
I would assume, at least using the same body, they've got a good understanding of where you are from the Cyber Essentials they've done with you. So it's much easier steps, going on to the next stage with them. Yeah,
you start building a relationship, build a rapport, and the assessors will, and generally the business will understand how that your subject business is operating. They'll understand the infrastructure, any idiosyncrasies they may have. And it just makes the whole process, it really supports the development of that process, and it supports the Plus activities. And the Plus activities really are the certification body conducting a number of tests on the devices to prove to them as a certification body, and also to prove to the client that their systems are working how they expect them to work. And there are cases where clients may be going through Plus, and we find out that the systems are not working how they thought they could work. They were supposed to work, which is not a problem. It's better us to identify it than a piece of malware.
A real hack actually getting through and breaching the systems and taking data or even ransomware in them. It's much better that you've actually tested it works in advance.
Exactly, but there's also a misconception that C Plus is essentially harder than achieving C Basic, and if you can achieve the basic level, you're complying with the standards and the controls. If you've answered that correctly and your systems are working exactly how you think they should work, then Plus you should sail through the Plus audit.
Yeah, it should be quite straightforward. It's because it's just proving the answers that you've given in that self-assessment piece, really.
Exactly.
Yeah. So again, how is this normally done? Is this, like a remote, sensor tool, or do people have to come onto site to do it? How is it normally carried out, the actual Plus component?
Yeah. So a few years ago, everything was done on site. Whereas with the introduction of remote working and all the issues we had with COVID, it's fairly common practice now for these to be conducted remotely. Some of the main tests that we conduct in the Plus audit are vulnerability scanning, external and internal vulnerability scanning. So the certification body is likely to use some iteration of a remote vulnerability scanner, and that would involve possibly loading an application onto the endpoint device, linking it with a cloud platform that the assessor is using, and then essentially conducting all the internal scanning just as if they were sat on site, as they would have done a few years ago.
Okay, well, that sounds pretty straightforward. Well, thanks ever so much today. We've run out of time because we've come up to 15 minutes, but thanks ever so much for going through that, through the Cyber Essentials and the difference between Plus and the ability and the process we follow. What we've got tomorrow is we're going to go into more depth on some other areas. And one of the things we're going to cover tomorrow is ASME governance. So again, we're going to talk tomorrow about that and how that can help an organization. And it's giving them some of the similar mappings to things like ISO 27001. And we'll go through that process. But also, we're going to talk about your holistic security audits as well, and how that can bring out some other areas that are away from just the cybersecurity pieces. So, join us on Thursday at 12:30 to see that. Also on Friday, we're going to cover the first of the 10 steps around the cybersecurity centers, 10 steps for a business to be more protected. So come and join us on Friday for that. And we're starting with step 1 on that. So please join us at that point. And thank you for joining us today. And thank you, Pete, for helping us put this together.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks a lot.